my husband's voice through the fog before I could move a single finger. "Just get it notarized by Friday," he said. His tone was the same one he used to discuss refinancing the car. Calm. Efficient. Like I was already a closed account. "My name is Senna Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and I work in forensic accounting. I find fraud for a living. I find the moments where numbers stop telling the truth. What I did not expect was to spend 11 days unconscious in a hospital bed while the man I married quietly dismantled everything I'd spent a decade building, and then wake up to discover he'd left one thing behind: a mistake. 3 weeks before my accident, I was wrapping up a contract audit for a mid-sized real estate firm in Columbus. Routine work. I drove home on a Tuesday evening in early March, stopped at the grocery store, picked up soup and sourdough because I'd been fighting a cold, and walked into our kitchen to find my husband sitting at the island with his laptop open and a beer he hadn't offered to share. We'd been married 4 years. His name is not important anymore, so I'll just call him what he revealed himself to be: my husband. That's all he is now. A title, a category. I'd sensed something shifting for months. Small things. He stopped asking about my cases. He started working late on days I knew his firm had nothing pressing. He took 2 phone calls outside on the back porch in January in 30-degree weather. I noted it the way I note everything, quietly, without showing my hand. I did not confront him. That is not how I operate. Instead, the week before my accident, I did something I'd done before for clients but never for myself. I created a documentation trail. I made copies of every joint account statement, every deed, every investment record. I photographed the interior of our home. Our joint accounts, the vacation property in Lake Erie we'd purchased 2 summers ago, my grandmother's china set, the original oil painting my aunt left me when she passed. I documented all of it. I stored everything on an encrypted external drive that I kept in my office at work, locked in the bottom drawer of my desk, behind a filing cabinet. No one moved. I don't know exactly why I did it when I did it. Some part of me must have understood. The accident happened on a Wednesday morning. Black ice on the on-ramp to I-71. My car hit the guardrail, rolled twice, and I was unconscious by the time the first responders arrived. Traumatic brain injury, they said. Induced coma to reduce swelling. My prognosis was uncertain for the first 72 hours. My husband was my emergency contact. He arrived at the hospital within the hour. Concerned husband, every nurse said. He held my hand in photographs he posted to Facebook. Asking for prayers. Asking for strength. He looked devastated in the way that people look devastated when a camera is nearby. What he was actually doing, I would find out later, was moving fast. He'd spoken to an attorney by day 3. Not about my medical care. About our assets. He had temporary authority over our joint accounts through power of attorney paperwork we'd signed years ago. Standard stuff, something my own financial advisor had recommended in case of emergency. He used it to liquidate the joint investment account. $47,000 moved into a personal account I had no access to. He then called the realtor who'd sold us the Lake Erie property and listed it for a fast sale. He told her I was in critical condition and we needed to simplify our finances. She didn't question it. He told my mother I probably wouldn't make it. My mother called my sister. My sister drove 6 hours from Pittsburgh. She sat beside my bed for 4 days, holding my hand, not knowing that the man on the other side of the room was quietly making sure there'd be nothing left for me to come home to. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd also made a different kind of preparation about a year earlier, one that had nothing to do with my unease about his behavior and everything to do with my professional instincts. I'd gone through a complicated probate case the year before. A client's spouse had hidden marital assets inside a secondary LLC, structured so cleanly that my client had no idea it existed until after the divorce was finalized. It took us 8 months to untangle. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking garage and thought about my own life, about how much I simply trusted without verifying. So I restructured, quietly. I opened a solo investment account in my name alone and moved a significant portion of my personal earnings there over 18 months. I created a separate LLC for my consulting contracts, legal, documented, my name only. I updated my beneficiary designations. And I rented a small storage unit 2 miles from my office, where I kept physical copies of everything important: contracts, account statements, the deed to the vacation property, my grandmother's estate documents, the appraisal records for the painting, a handwritten letter from my aunt describing her intentions when she gave it to me. My husband knew none of this. He thought he understood my financial picture. He didn't. He understood the part I let him see. I woke up on day 11, not dramatically. There was no gasp, no sudden flood of awareness. It was more like surfacing slowly through cold water. Sounds first, then shapes, then the weight of my own body. A nurse noticed my eyes tracking movement and called for the attending physician. By that evening, I could squeeze fingers on command. My husband was there. His relief looked real enough. Maybe some of it was. People are complicated, but as he leaned over to brush my forehead with a kiss, I caught something in his eyes just beneath the surface. An assessment. He was calculating. I let my face stay slack. I let my voice stay weak when I finally spoke. I asked for water. I asked for my mother. I did not ask about our accounts. He left that night around 9. I waited 20 minutes, then I asked the night nurse if I could use my phone. My work phone had been in my jacket pocket during the accident and was destroyed. But I had a secondary phone, a habit I'd developed after one too many cases involving stolen data that my sister had brought from my apartment without knowing what it was. She'd thought it was old. She set it on the table next to my flowers. I logged into my secure document portal. Everything was where I'd left it. Then I checked the joint account. The balance was $214. I didn't react. A nurse walked past the window and I looked like a woman resting. I opened my email. There was a listing alert from the Lake Erie property. It had gone pending 4 days ago, scheduled to close in 8 days. I put the phone face down on my chest and stared at the ceiling tiles for a long time. Then I started making a list. I was discharged 14 days after my accident, still slower than I liked, still with headaches that came and went like weather. My husband picked me up. He carried my bag. He drove carefully, pointed out that he'd stocked the refrigerator, mentioned he'd been managing things while I was out so I didn't need to worry. Managing things, that's what he called it. I nodded. I thanked him. I said I was tired and went to lie down. That afternoon, while he was on a call downstairs, I opened my laptop and began working. Step 1. I contacted my personal attorney. Not the one we share for estate planning, but a woman I'd hired for my LLC work 2 years ago. I texted her from my secondary phone. 4 words: I need you now. She called back within the hour. Step 2. I called the forensic accounting firm I'd referred clients to for years, people I trusted, and arranged for an independent audit of every transaction made during my incapacitation. Cash payment routed through my LLC account, which my husband had no knowledge of and no access to. Step 3. I called the realtor handling the Lake Erie sale and introduced myself as the co-owner of the property, currently recovering from a serious accident, and asked whether she had documentation showing my written consent to the listing. There was a pause. She said she had spoken only with my husband. I said that was a problem. She asked me to hold. I did not feel angry in that moment. I felt precise. There's a difference. Anger is noise. Precision is a scalpel. I have spent my career learning to feel the difference. The cell hit me first deceptive and something's feeder underneath the slowly being, people are slowly being found out when the realtor's office called him. He came upstairs to where I was sitting in the bedroom, and I watched his face go through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, concern, calculation, then something that might have been, for the first time, fear. How did you... He started. I was looking at my laptop screen. I said, I'd like you to sleep in the guest room tonight. He left the doorway without finishing his sentence. That was a Wednesday. By Friday, my attorney had filed an emergency motion to freeze our remaining joint assets pending a financial misconduct review. By the following Tuesday, the forensic audit had documented $47,000 in unauthorized transfers, the attempted sale of jointly owned property without co-owner consent, and 3 charges on our joint credit card made to what turned out to be a florist in a city I'd never been to. On dates, I was in the ICU. My husband had been sending someone flowers while I was on a ventilator. I sat with that for a moment when I read the report, not because it broke me. I think some part of me had already processed it. But because it made everything make sense in that particular way that evidence always does, it doesn't surprise you, it confirms you. There was also the matter of the painting. My aunt's painting had been removed from the wall in our living room. My husband told me when I asked that he'd had it appraised for insurance purposes, and it was in a climate-controlled storage facility. The appraiser he'd contacted, whose business card I found in his desk while looking for a pen, had a secondary business listing as a private art broker. I forwarded that to my attorney without comment. The painting was recovered from a private sale negotiation in Chicago before the transaction was completed. The broker received a cease and desist. My husband received a separate letter from my attorney informing him that removal of separately owned inherited property constituted conversion under Ohio law. He called me that night. His voice was different. The calm was gone. "Senna," he said, "we can work this out." I said, "I know you believe that." He said, "Whatever you think happened?" I said, "I don't think. I document." There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I could hear him breathing. I said, "My attorney will be in touch." The hearing was not dramatic. I've been in enough depositions to understand that justice, real justice, does not look like a courtroom monologue. It looks like spreadsheets. It looks like timestamps. It looks like a forensic report printed on white paper, line by line, amount by amount, date by date, each entry a small, quiet fact that cannot be argued with. My attorney presented the unauthorized wire transfers, the attempted property sale, the removal of inherited personal property, the credit card charges, and the receipts, which the florist provided, which included a personal note my husband had written to a woman whose name I won't say here because she's not the point. My husband's attorney tried to argue that he'd acted in good faith under a reasonable interpretation of power of attorney in a medical emergency. My attorney submitted the actual text of the power of attorney document, which specified that authority was limited to medical and immediate household expenses during incapacitation, not investment liquidation, not property sales, not flower arrangements. The judge asked my husband's attorney if he'd read the document before making that argument. There was a silence. The judgment came down in my favor on all counts. Full restitution of the liquidated investment account. The Lake Erie property remained in joint title pending our divorce proceedings. The painting was formally returned to my sole possession with a court order documenting its status as separately owned inherited property. There were also civil penalties, and a referral to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges under Ohio's financial exploitation statute. My husband called me after the hearing. I let it go to voicemail. I played it twice, then saved it to a folder labeled simply documentation. But that is not, as it turns out, the end of the story. 2 days after the hearing, I was going through the records my forensic accountant had pulled, looking for anything I'd missed, when I found a transaction I didn't recognize. Small amount. Recurring. $22 a month for 2 years, to a company name I didn't know. I ran it. It was a data broker subscription, the kind that aggregates personal financial records, social media profiles, family connections, real estate history. My husband had been paying for a data subscription on my identity for 2 years. He'd been monitoring me. I sat with that for a long time, not because it frightened me, because it explained something I'd wondered about. A few moments, scattered across the years, when he'd seemed to know something I hadn't told him. A comment about a client I was fairly sure I hadn't mentioned. A question about a trip I'd planned, but not yet discussed. I had thought I was being prepared. I had thought I was the one watching. He had been watching, too. He just wasn't as good at it. I reported the data subscription to my attorney, who added it to the documentation file and forwarded it to a privacy attorney I spoke with once, briefly, who described it as potentially actionable under federal statute. That conversation is ongoing. What I know is this. He spent 2 years collecting information on me, believing that knowledge was leverage. He accessed our joint accounts the moment I lost consciousness, believing that speed was power. He moved assets, listed property, removed a painting from our wall, and sent flowers to another woman, all while I was on a ventilator, believing that my silence was defeat. He was wrong about what silence means. I am back in my office now. The headaches are mostly gone. I've taken on 2 new clients, both referrals, both complex. I eat lunch at my desk some days and look at the painting my aunt left me, which is hanging now on the wall across from my monitor where I can see it while I work. My divorce attorney says we should be finalized within the year. I don't talk about what happened much, not because I'm ashamed, but because the people who need to know already know, and the paperwork has been filed, and the account balances have been restored, and the painting is on my wall. I kept copies of everything. I always do. And the next time someone assumes that a woman going quiet means she's given up, I hope they remember that some of us go quiet the way an accountant goes quiet. Not because we have nothing to say, but because we're counting.